that the net migration figures have been released today. Now, let me tell you, it is not good news for the Tories. The figures so far, well, I've got to say, actually, the previous years have been revised up. Because do you remember we all had that figure, didn't we? 606,100,000, I think that was the figure that we had. Well, that has been revised to 745,000. And also, if we look to the year to June 2023 so far, we've got a net migration figure of 672,000 people. This is a little graph. If you're listening, not watching, I shall describe in short order what you're seeing. This is the net migration figures, basically from the year 2000 to the year 2023. To summarise, that is astronomically increasing. You can see some interesting points on that graph there. I've showed you where Labour were in power. I've pointed out where the Tories were too. Also, the point of Brexit. You can see that when we went into the COVID lockdowns as well, we had people leaving, so we had that number decreasing. Then we saw the starts of a new immigration system, and you can see, and if you just look at the numbers, I've extended towards the end of that graph per year, so you can see the changes there that things are having. But if you're listening, not watching, take my word for it, it is soaring high. Ben Habib, your thoughts?
I mean, the first comment I'd like to make is that people tend to talk, and we all talk because the government presents it this way, in net migration figures. But actually, we ought to be looking at the gross migration figure, because if we're interested not just in the economic impact of what's taking place, but the social impact, it's the gross figures that matter. And last year we had, which has now been revised up, 745,000 net migration, but we had closer to 1.2 or 1.3 million gross migration. That's a city the size of that's two cities the size of Manchester, 2 and a bit cities. And we've had 3.5 million of gross migration, not using the word gross in the other sense of the word, but gross numbers of migration, 3.5 million or so, which is over 6 times the size of Manchester. That is, from a social perspective, incredibly difficult for the country to cope with. But then from the net migration perspective, there's a huge burden. We've had something like a couple of million people in the last 3 years on a net migration basis. Now think of that, a couple of million people. That is at least 500,000 or 600,000 houses required. That's a huge burden on the NHS. That's a huge burden on our educational establishments. A lot of these people coming across ostensibly for university degrees, never taking those degrees up and then disappearing into the undergrowth of the United Kingdom to find jobs and whatever. And of course, the economic impact of all of that is also dire, because what they're doing is undercutting the migration wage. The wage to get a work visa has been set by this government at about £26,000 per annum, which is about more than 20% less than the median wage in the UK. So you've got net migrants coming in, undercutting the indigenous workforce, if you like, for want of a better description of those who are already here, British citizens, making it more competitive and difficult for them to get jobs. And you end up in this kind of third world economic ecosystem, even though we're a first world country, without any pressure on the government and indeed large business to upskill, to automate, to produce better results for the nation on a per capita basis. So even though GDP by some miracle hasn't collapsed, GDP per capita has been going down dramatically over the last few years. And of course, productivity with this low-skilled approach to the labour markets has also collapsed. Nothing to do with Brexit, nothing to do with rejoiners and OBR and all the rest forecasting Brexit causing this damage. It is unbridled, low-skilled immigration that's having the economic impact.
Yeah, but hold on though, because there were a lot of Europeans that were doing a variety of jobs in this country that did now choose or have now chosen to return to either homelands or wherever. So therefore, we do have, I mean, the skills shortage occupation list is as long as my arms put together. And that's why we're then bringing in a lot of resource at 20% below, you know,
median wage,
wages. So people will push back on that, hearing you, and say, but Brexit has contributed to us now needing to import.
Well, we were importing it before. We had exactly the same approach. It wasn't highly skilled German and French engineers who were coming to the UK. It was unskilled Bulgarians, Romanians, and I love the polls, but, you know, it was Eastern European, Central and Eastern European people coming to the UK fulfilling jobs that the British workforce should be doing and encouraged to be doing. But, of course, we've also got a tax system that militates against people working. You know, the Chancellor made a big thing yesterday about cutting national insurance, but fiscal drag is going to take 4 million people into the tax net over the next 3 years. And they're disincentivised from working. So, again, the government falls back on the easiest option, which is unskilled, unbridled immigration. It's a catastrophe.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the land that would think this is good news for the Tories. Is there anybody? I'm going to put an appeal out.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put an appeal out. I'm going to search high and low. Ask your neighbours, ask your friends. Is there anyone out there today who's sitting there thinking this figure of 745,000 people in net migration? And by the way, I just got to add to this, that is the number that we know of, because I am not convinced that absolutely everybody is indeed counted within those figures. Are you? So I shall throw this out to you. Is there anyone that is happy about this figure today? Is there anyone that thinks that this is good news? A couple of questions for you to ponder. I'm going to bring Matthew in as well. Do you think that Labour would be able to do a better job of managing our borders, our asylum system? Do you think it's time for a cap now when it comes to the numbers? And if so, where would you place that cap? Which numbers, where, which sectors would you be restricting? That is your homework